Oh, welcome back. And this discussion we're going to be having is going to focus on corruption, the war on anti-corruption in the African continent. We're going to be looking at what is going on in Sierra Leone. We can compare and contrast notes and see if we can learn lessons from the wonderful country, Sierra Leone. Our guest this morning is Francis Ben Kaifala. He's the Commissioner for Anti-Corruption Commission of the Republic of Sierra Leone, which is the equivalent of Nigeria's Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. He's also the president of the network of anti-corruption institutions in West Africa and an elected board member of African Union Advisory Board on Corruption. So he's the one and the great guy we will talk to today about corruption in the African continent. Great to have you join us this morning, Ben Kaifala.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent, brilliant, and I'm sure you bring us greetings from Freetown.
Oh yes, very, very warm greetings from Freetown.
Just to ask, to sort of make it a bit calmer, is there anything free in Freetown?
Well, some things maybe, but a lot of it are not free. You can enjoy the beaches.
There's no free
Our
lunch.
wonderful beaches and coastlines are free.
Yeah.
You can access and stay there, but you buy your drinks and food.
Excellent, and to the big part of the discussion, you know, we like to deal with the elephant first or eat the frog first in the conversations we have. So, Sierra Leone, together with Nigeria and many West African countries, you know, have had issues with corruption. The money is mind-boggling that have been lost from independence for both countries to what corruption has done. And just like Nigeria also too has dealt with corruption in the past also and made gains and reversed those gains and has tried to make those gains again. The same way I see also too going through the reports that you have also had to deal with. I've seen that Sierra Leone has moved up on the Transparency Index for corruption several slots from where it used to be at the lower rungs of the ladder, just like Nigeria. What would you say has been the most, there's no silver bullet I can imagine in solving this problem, but what has been the most significant thing that has happened in your tenure in the head of the Sierra Leone Anti-Corruption Commission that you have applied and has made things happen very quickly in your situation?
Well, the first thing is really the existence of the environment for you to do the work. So there has to be a president who wants the fight against corruption to continue and succeed. And of course, the political will around it, which goes beyond the president, other actors, the legislator, the parliament, the judiciary, and other actors in government also have to support the fight and the buy-in of the people. So the really significant thing that has happened is that environment for us to be able to do legal and policy reforms that can empower our strategy for it to succeed as we are doing.
Excellent.
We're still going to go into details as to how you were able to get what you did. But aside that, a lot of people do not see corruption as having a huge impact, meaning there is a cost attached to corruption. So would you be able to break that down for us and let us understand?
Yeah, I mean, before I was elected, I was appointed. Before I was appointed commissioner, in fact, that is the conversation I had with the president when I was called upon to lead the institution, and I said, we have to understand the cost of corruption in economic terms. It's not about what really is stolen, it's about what you lose because people don't invest in your country. It's about what you lose because aid is not coming, donors are not supporting what you do. It's about what you lose by the reputational cost, just by people knowing that this is a corrupt country. It even goes beyond what is taken from the cookie jar. So I had this conversation with him, and it's quite enormous. It is really what sometimes in Africa we get blindsided about. We focus too much on what is stolen, but we do not even look at what is not even brought in the country because of who we are and how we do things. So we have to understand that corruption goes down to the fabric of the nation. If the roads are not proper or they are not well built, when resources have been allocated for it, it's because somebody is applying them wrongly, either through conflict of interest or simply just siphoning the money somewhere. If our children are not getting good schools, hospitals, things that other countries have forgotten, energy, these are all vestiges and implications of corruption. And it is when we really, really focus on tackling corruption, controlling it to such a level that the nation can succeed, and we can move forward.
You know, the jury is often very brutal and harsh. You're a legal practitioner, so you can imagine also too how it's important that you have to win your cases.
Yes.
You know, to show that you're great at what you're doing.
Yep.
If you think about what some of the things you've talked about now, which bothers around public perception, I see that you have perception index for what you're doing there pretty high, I think, for the government of President Madabio,
yes,
saying that you have more than 60% of the people saying they think that corruption is reducing,
yes,
but not gone yet in your country. International donors who play a huge part in the country's economy also think too that things are improving.
Yes.
Why is it important for public perception to show that the war against corruption is being won, especially from the people of the country?
Because the science of measuring corruption is largely based on perception. So that is why, for example, our fight against corruption in Sierra Leone is engineered and structured on 4 pillars of prevention, prosecution, and investigation. But the 4th pillar and the most and very important one is public education. You have to bring the public along. You have to make them understand the evils of corruption and to rally their support. And if you follow me, for example, in social media, personally, I do a lot of that. Recently, I had to tell the entire country, like presidents will do, sit down in town hall meetings with the citizens of every major town and have a conversation on corruption, but also educate them on certain things. So that element is very important to the fight against corruption, because when they are measuring what you do, there's a difference between reality sometimes and perception. But if you do not bring perception along, perception can be more important than reality. So when the man wakes up in the morning and he's hungry, his children does not have money to feed his children, and they ask him about corruption, he says, oh, these are a bunch of corrupt people. And if you have more people saying that, definitely, no matter what you're doing, that is what will be communicated. But we have been bringing the public along, and that has really helped us in changing the perception. Recently, there was a survey that was done, and 92% of the citizens had confidence in the institution that is fighting corruption over any other institution. That is a really high in Africa. That is a really high benchmark for us, but that was local. But even the international benchmark has shown, for example, Afrobarometer shows that corruption prevalence has reduced in Sierra Leone from 70% 3 years ago to 40% now. I mean, these are independent data that are coming in, and they analyze how people, for example, they ask simple questions. When did anybody ask you for bribes when you went for services? Did you pay bribes when you went for services? And then they have their benchmarks to be able to determine whether there has been a reduction or a prevalence. So these are the kinds of things you have to bring the public along in a fight against corruption. If not, you're wasting your time.
Wow. I mean, hearing it from you sounds like something that's easy said, easy done. I just read out this fact that I got from one of your speeches. $2 million worth of stolen assets recovered, increased convictions by 200%. How easy was this? Didn't you get any fight, even from the judicial arm that even helps in yes, hitting these guys at the dock?
One thing I did when I became commissioner in Sierra Leone is to diversify the results of the fight against corruption. Before, things were not happening because everything was cost-based and court-led. In a fight against corruption, that everything leads to the court will make the institution that is fighting corruption to look very useless. Because we all know that in Africa, there are challenges with the judiciary. Of course, we navigated the judicial problem by setting up the special division of the High Court. The special anti-corruption division of the High Court, with 5 dedicated judges that only sit on corruption cases. It made our case clogs to reduce. It makes our cases to move faster. It reduced the time of trials from average of 3 to 6 years to just about 3 months. Most of our cases end in 1 month. But that is really one thing we did. But the non-conviction based asset recovery was also a power that we went to Parliament and got to allow us to go after the asset and not the person. So if you steal 1 billion yuans, we go after the 1 billion yuans and forget about you firstly, because the asset is important. There are hospitals to build, there are roads to make, there are things to do with money. There's the general administration of governance to continue. So we go after the assets, and that does not only include money, it includes houses, hotels, includes, we can get it from you without going to court. So it's non-conviction based. But once we get it from you, you are barred from holding public office for a minimum of 3 years. And of course, you pay back whatsoever money with a 10%, minimum 10% interest rate. It could be as high as 30% or 50%, depending on aggravated circumstances. And what we determined was the profit you made from whatsoever you looted from the state. Right. So these are all, that strategy really worked very well. That is, in fact, the Americans are so impressed with that kind of approach that it's really giving a lot of respect to what we are doing in Sierra Leone. And many countries are coming to really try to understand how we are doing it, because we have recovered millions of dollars just like this, and we give it back to the state. Every year, at the end of the year, I give checks to the president from monies that we recover from the corrupt, and we return it to the state coffers for it to be used for purposes. And the one thing we do is we identify a project for it to be used. So if this money, let's say 7.5 billion, is to be built to build a hospital, it has to go to building a hospital. So we do not just send it back for it to go into the consolidated revenue fund. So these are all really approaches that are working, including the prosecutions. We are doing a lot of prosecution, but it is not a one-way street. We can use the other approaches as well. Right.
We're going to spread our dragnet across the West African sub-region and Africa, where you also do hold a position too, because it's easy for you to be in Sierra Leone and see things. But if you're on the continent, you can see also too where the problems are. So I'm going to ask you first and foremost, before I even delve into the West African sub-region, about how you see things working, whether it's in Monrovia, or it's in Freetown, or it's in Accra, Ghana, or the 16 member nations of ECOWAS. What lessons have you learnt from Nigeria? Because I'm sure the viewers are, listening to how impressive and wondering perhaps maybe the lessons you've learned, or no lessons at all have you learned
from a country like Nigeria?
Yes.
I think Nigeria presents a lot of lessons for us. First of all, Nigeria had anti-corruption institutions before us. So when our institution was being set up, we had to copy a lot of things from Nigeria, but also modified some of it to suit our own context and things like that. And I have a very good relationship with Nigeria. For example, when Magu was the head of the EFCC, he was a really close friend of mine, and we used to share ideas and things like that. And one thing we have learned is that the fight against corruption has to be borderless in West Africa. Our countries are so interconnected. The difference between Togo and Nigeria is so close for you not to be able to easily get information from Togo or Ghana or other countries that are close to Nigeria. The same thing for Sierra Leone. So we have been relating with Nigeria a lot on investigations and things. I have sent investigators to Nigeria.
But when Magu, for example, had to deal with the problems he faced, were you surprised? Were you disappointed? I mean, he's not the only EFCC
fighting corruption in Africa is a sacrifice. And when you take on the challenge and sacrifice, that includes whatsoever comes along the way. And that could include what we call retaliation. That could also include consequences like you yourself being attacked, because corruption has a way of fighting back. But also you yourself don't have to be at fault, so you can hold your hand up and say, okay, come, let's see what you have against me. So these are all sacrifices that we have to make. It's a huge challenge to fight corruption. Everybody worries about me every day. My mom hardly sleeps. Social media is now a problem. You have all kinds of things. But also you are going against the powerful. People with power, people with resources, people who are godfathers. They are the ones you go after, and of course,
but they appointed you. You think that they're meddlesome interlopers?
Well, you see, the fight against corruption has so much capital that if you harness it well, you can shift the power from the appointor to other sources. So, for example, if you rally the people behind you, politicians go for elections every 4 or 5 years. The people are the ones who vote. So if you are appointed and by your work, by your results, the people rally behind you, that is an important source of power behind the appointor. And of course, we call it in terms of economic terms, retaliation as well. The people can retaliate on your behalf. So politicians are very weary to just interfere with you when they know that the people support what you're doing, and they understand that if they come after you, is the retaliation. So the real power lies in bringing the media along and getting them behind you. The real power lies bringing the people along and getting them behind you. The real power lies in you being able to diversify the sources of power beyond the appointor. And that can only happen by the hard work you put in, by the results you put out, and how it is beneficial for the people. And sometimes by doing that, because for example in Sierra Leone now, one of the key exports of the president when he's going around addressing the UN, speaking to the US State Department, speaking to the African Union, is really the successes of the fight against corruption in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone has become a hub. Countries are coming to learn from us. Gambia is coming on the 25th to Sierra Leone to learn from us so that they can go and set up their own anti-corruption institution, modeling on what we are doing in Sierra Leone. Other countries like Liberia, Guinea, Malawi, Uganda have also come to Sierra Leone to learn from it. That is capital. That capital is not just for the institution that is fighting against corruption. It's also for the presidency. He's going to go to the election. What is he going to do? He has to sell that he's serious about his promises, and that included the fight against corruption. That capital he cannot just jeopardize. there has to be a very strong and powerful reason to do so. And that is one thing that is working very well in Sierra Leone, and the people are behind us.
So you said you've been able to, in a way, win over the people, like move the power from the politicians to the people.
Not all of them.
Not all
There
of
is
them.
always the political divide, but yeah.
You want to give a percent, a majority of them, probably half?
Yes, a very high majority. I told you that 92% believes in the institution that fights corruption.
92% is a whole lot.
It's a whole lot.
It is a whole lot.
Yes.
I mean, you win 92% of the people, that's a population, that's a whole lot.
It does.
And that's one issue we'll find across Africa, where the politicians are so powerful, they have the money to control the will of the people, and the corruption is, it cuts across, it's spread from the topmost to the lowest. The gate man will want to collect 500 naira from you before you go into, we use naira here in Nigeria, 500 naira, you know, before you go into see the secretary who will collect another amount of money before you go see the, you know, the oga at the top, like the boss, as we call it here in Nigeria. How were you able to make these people understand that, win them over, and not let them continue with the stomach infrastructure? That's a term we use here for people who wants to just get the money they're going to use to eat now, build the house now, and throw away the future. How were you able to make them?
It's a combination of many factors. One of the mistakes that anti-graft fighters in Africa do is like, they think they are policemen, and because they are policemen, you know, policemen don't like to speak to media except when it's absolutely necessary. They don't like to engage. Now the world is run by social media. They don't want to engage. Many anti-graft leaders in Africa don't even have a social media handle at all. So they do not connect with the people. They do not really. So when retaliation comes from them, the people are not connected to them. They are not interested in them. So it takes a lot of social mobilization from your end. The people want to hear from you. They want to know what is happening around you. They have to understand the intricacies of what you go through. So engaging them, like I am doing now, I often do in Sierra Leone. I walk into a radio station and we have a conversation around corruption. I hold town hall meetings across the country in every major town. Sit with them. I mean, really, it does not have to be very sophisticated people. And it's interesting what you learn from them and how much they listen to you. We sing, we dance with them together. If you go to some of my social media handles, you'll see the videos there. These are things that you have to do. You are not a policeman. You are a social mobilizer in support of a powerful cause. And that can only happen if you are with the people. If you keep yourself elitist, if you keep yourself in your little cocoon and think that you are occupying this position at the mercy of whosoever appointed you, then the people will not be with you. And when retaliation comes, nobody is interested.
It's interesting you mentioned policemen. Policemen often have led Nigeria's anti-corruption agency for several years. And there's been debate whether or not you should have policemen handle the position. I don't know what you think about that.
I think policemen have valuable experience that lead. What we do is we prefer for policemen to hand the investigative division of the institution. But when it comes to managing an anti-graft, because let me tell you this, our fight against corruption in Sierra Leone, for example, is standing on 4 pillars. All of them very important, all of them happening at the same time. So, for example, you have the investigation, which is more what the EFCC does. You have prosecution, which is also what the EFCC does, and of course the ICPC does as well. But you have 2 very important components: prevention, which the ICPC does a lot of it. The FCC does not really work too much on prevention. But also you have the public education and outreach segment, which the 2 institutions have. But there has to be a sync with all 4. Like they have to happen together. It's not like one happening and leaving the other behind, and you cannot overemphasize one after the other. And the bedrock of all of it is prevention. The ambulance fighting corruption, which is what really the public believes in, arresting people, detaining them, prosecuting them, getting high fines and all these things, is fire brigade. It's not worth it. Sometimes the house is burned before the ambulances come running in. Right. Prevention is the bedrock of the fight against corruption. Right. So how well does the country invest in prevention, which is not cheap, by the way. Prevention is extremely expensive, but it is really that which saves a country. So the fire brigade approach can bulldoze. So for example, when I became commissioner, it was all out war on corruption. Arrest, detention for several days, prosecutions, convictions. It was really naming and shaming, taking people to the cutting tree in the center square of Freetown in handcuffs for the public to see. But we caught their attention. A lot of public outcry, a lot of debate over human rights and things like that. But then after that, I told the government that, look, we have the attention of everybody. Now invest in prevention. So the tax authorities brought in Asikuda Plus Plus to make sure that people don't touch money much. There's cashless economy and things like that, particularly when it comes to governance, receipting systems, audit trails, and all those things. That is where the fight against corruption is, because the society will always revert back to the same problems you are trying to bulldoze if prevention is not there to cover your way. So the bedrock of the fight against corruption is that, and that is one thing that really a country like Nigeria, as president of the Network of Anti-Corruption Institution in West Africa, and also as part of the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption, that is what we are advising every country. Do not focus too much on arresting people and detaining them. The real fight against corruption is prevention. They say prevention is better than cure. The English have a beautiful way of putting it to say an ounce of prevention is better than tons of remedy. That is exactly it. It is good for medicine as it is good for the fight against corruption.
The fight against corruption in Africa is pretty long and unwinding, right? And to some people, it's owing to the fact that some assistance somewhat is coming from developed nations, where actually you take the entire shore of the money to. In your experience, how were you able to break that particular hold
of
Western influence when it comes to corruption in Africa?
Well, it's a question, really. I am a nationalist. I believe in what I do in my country beyond what other people can affect. So, for example, we do a lot of asset tracing and recovery. So we work with institutions in the UK, for example, where most of the money used to go. We work with the US, we work with other institutions like Ghana, Nigeria, and also Gambia, where we found that traditionally people take money, but recently they have been taking them to places in South Africa, Namibia, and Mauritius, and other places. So it's significant, but I really believe that the strength of that lies in what you do in country. So, for example, how seriously you close the loopholes and gaps to prevent assets, the flight of those monies out of the country before you start going after them. But also how seriously you hold the people accountable in country. And then it's easier for you to deal with those who come from outside. So that is how we have done it. We have more focused on fighting it inwards than focusing on getting from outside and bringing it back in. Sometimes we look at it and say, this is throwing good money after bad money, let's leave that. But let's make sure it does not happen again. So, for example, the Pandora Papers are out, but there's no mention of Sierra Leone at all. Excellent. It's because we have not allowed that to happen. Our financial intelligence is very powerful. Our financial intelligence unit is very powerful. We check the banking system. We do a lot of resilience tests and all those things, and we work with other interagencies to make sure that we are seeing what is happening. And the reporting system is very good. We check PEPs, politically exposed persons, to see what resources they have control over and access to. And of course, we do a lot of lifestyle audits as well to ensure that people. So for now, it is working. It is by no means foolproof. We are not saying that no, corruption is not happening in Sierra Leone, but it is just being limited to such a degree that our reputation is growing and the cost of corruption on Sierra Leone that existed previously is getting less, and more people are having confidence in investing in Sierra Leone. And of course, we are becoming a powerful attraction for the experience with the fight against corruption.
You know, it's great and refreshing hearing you, young, and being able to express this sort of viewpoints about many things. And interesting, you also mentioned the Pandora Papers also too. In your position with the West African sub-region, with the African Union, I'm sure too that you've seen and heard things, and the way the discussion has been polarized. I wouldn't exactly polarized. I think more people are in the category of the people who think it's an interesting work of fiction, and they put it in their libraries and don't bother to investigate like its predecessors, the Panama Papers and the other ones, Paradise Papers. Why I say this is because I think that when you look at what has happened in the past and how people have glossed over these sort of things for the majority of the countries whose names have been mentioned in Africa and haven't done anything about them, does it trouble you that they haven't done anything and don't intend to do anything? And then what category would you fall in if you were in such a country where you had the luxury of having people on that list?
I think one thing we have done is our proactiveness in checking these things. So, for example, when the Pandora's Papers came out, the president was at Onga. Okay, I woke up in the morning and he sent me a message to say, you have to check what is happening with these Pandora Papers to see whether Sierra Leone is mentioned at all or anybody has done anything that could affect Sierra Leone. That came from the president, a text message. I have it in my phone. So it's nothing can express political will more than that. But also nothing can express a country that is really serious about ensuring that it continues to keep its image clean. Maybe some of those countries have benefited a lot from a clean image, but we have suffered from a battered image due to corruption. And we have a desire to keep it clean. So, I mean, I can't understand why Pandora's Papers should bring things that are significant for an institution that is fighting corruption to look into, and nobody does. I mean, I can't understand.
If you're the African Union and you had an opportunity to be at the, to address the heads of government, during one of the summits that they have in Addis Ababa, you tell them point blank that simply ignoring when corruption is pointed out by international bodies, or even the media in this case, which work together. So you had African journalists work together with international Western journalists to point out corruption happening there. That not talking or ignoring it is absolutely wrong. Would you be able to tell them that? Of course,
it is absolutely wrong. And I have told you, you have to be proactive. And sometimes checking these things is not. So, for example, before I became commissioner, Sierra Leone had a lot of reputational damage from the Western media and from institutions like the Red Cross, that money taken to Sierra Leone to fight Ebola was stolen.
Good.
Okay, what we did was, when I became commissioner, one of the things we did was to check these reports. So, for example, there was one that was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers on behalf of Red Cross, which said $2 million was stolen in Sierra Leone. We investigated and found out that that money they are saying was lost was really because their own staff, foreign staff they brought into Sierra Leone, some of whom were Nigerians, by the way, were the ones who were badly negotiating interest rates conversion. So, for example, money comes in Nigeria in dollars. When you are changing it to Naira, there is the up rate that you should have negotiated because it's a fluctuating interest rate, but you negotiate the base rate. So the losses between that high rate and the base rate was what they calculated and said that Sierra Leone has stolen. And it damaged us badly. But we checked this and challenged them with it, and everybody agreed that the conclusions that were drawn from that investigation by PwC was wrong. So it also helped us in the narrative to say, look, we have to be proactive with these things. And I remember when we brought out that report in Sierra Leone, everybody was like, but for 2 years we have suffered with this thing. They say that money was stolen to fight. And imagine somebody saying we took money to Sierra Leone to fight Ebola and you stole it. Not knowing that it is simple interest rate negotiation that was manipulated by their own people. And therefore, nobody stole money at all. Not 1 million went to anybody in Sierra Leone. So if you are not proactive about it, for example, Pandora's Papers have come out, name countries like Kenya and other places,
Nigeria's
really highly placed people in society. Sometimes when you check, it is not really how these papers are presenting it. So the whole idea, what I am trying to zoom at is to say that it's not always about it being corrupt, really. It's also about getting a clear understanding of the issues of the country. So, for example, when the Pandora's Papers came out and I got wind of it, I called our prevention department, the director, and some key staff who I know are very good at research. I said, go and find the Pandora Papers, comb it through, prepare a report for Sierra Leone, and they did. They forwarded it to me and I shared it with all the stakeholders involved. And we can confidently say that there is nothing on Sierra Leone. So otherwise, journalists will be saying Pandora Papers are out and Sierra Leoneans are hiding money everywhere. It affects the fight against corruption in Sierra Leone. It affects because some of them are reckless. They really have not done their research. They have not checked what is happening.
But if, there was
if you are not prepared,
if there was a Sierra Leonean mentioned, would you have gone against?
Oh yes, we would have. Clearly, we would have. If there was a Sierra Leonean mentioned, no matter who that Sierra Leonean is. I mean, we have investigated the First Lady of Sierra Leone. We have investigated somebody in the State Chief of Protocol, very close to the President. Right. The former Vice President is standing trial. The former President is under investigation as I speak with you. We have investigated heads of department of agencies, ministries, department, directors, highly placed people that nobody could imagine in Africa that those kinds of people could be investigated. Why wouldn't we check? We will check. And we have authority to check.
Leaving no stone unturned. That's a pretty good one. It sounds very inspiring when we hear you talk about this and seeing that even you're a youth. And from the look of things, our discussion so far, I think everybody has a responsibility to play in ensuring that corruption is driven out of the continent.
It has to be a collective fight, and just not to take from you, but that is it. Fighting corruption is a whole government approach. It's not just the institution that fights corruption, but also it has to receive the buy-in and support of the people.
Absolutely. So let's focus on the youth this time around, seeing that you are youth. It's so inspiring to see that across the continent, at different points in time, youth have come out to protest against bad governance, against corruption, against police brutality, against everything. And Nigeria is not far from that. Just yesterday, we had our one-year youth in Nigeria, 1 year anniversary of the hashtag #EndSARS protest. It's a fight against police brutality, and it spreads its tentacle to bad governance, corruption, and the rest of them. Now, let's talk about the responsibility of youth in helping to save the future generation of going through the same issues you're going with in the issue of fighting corruption. We don't have youth participation so much in politics here because of the godfatherism thing, and the corruption still, is still endemic here. So you spoke about retracing the Sankara footstep. He was the youth, and
yes,
he did so much with it. Talk to us about how much lesson we can learn from that, particularly here in Nigeria and other parts of Africa, how youth can stand up and help break the legs of the corruption.
Yes, I am a Sankarist. I believe in the doctrines and the work of Sankara. And he died at the age of 36, which is just about my age. But I believe that as way back as 1983, 85, 86, 87, 89, there was somebody who saw where Africa should go and did things about it in terms of self-sufficiency, in terms of managing our own affairs, not waiting for someone to dictate on us, in terms of the rights of women, giving them a seat on the table, and exercise and things like that really is useful. So I am a pure Sankarist, and that is why the Sankara Dream is really the theme of what I am doing in Sierra Leone, and pushing it and bringing the young people along and getting them to understand what we have to do. I think that there's no gainsaying that Africa needs it. We have to understand that things have to be done. We have to have more control over our destiny. I live at the Oriental Hotel, very close to the bridge where the protests were happening, and I was very interested in seeing what was happening yesterday and things like that. And very refreshing to also see that young people really, what they really want is modernization. What they really want is change. Without going into the details of what precipitated it, I just think that Africa has to be willing to follow the Sankara path, with variations for every country. We don't have to be Burkina Faso, but we have to have that minimum content of things that can move the continent forward, and that should be non-negotiable.
Absolutely, you're very frank and blunt. They're sort of revolutionary in the way you think how the continent should evolve, and I dare say there's no other way to think it when you look at how the continent is faring. On almost all the developmental indices, the corruption is what led to the chaos and the anarchy going in the Sahel, where Nigeria is largely involved. Responsible also too for the wars that were fought in Sierra Leone, next door Liberia. The consequences we still see.
And the coup d'etats that are happening.
Yes.
Are happening also too, But help me understand in terms of from Addis Ababa, which is the center of African politics. You mentioned the youths in the way they have been able to thrive and lead and excel in the different humanities and sciences. The youths occupy all of this space. There's a young guy in Tanzania, he's the youngest billionaire. I was watching him the other day. They're all involved in the technology, but in the politics, when you go to Addis Ababa and you see the leadership there, the Africa's median age, I'm sure, is not more than 18 or 19 at most. And you see the leadership of the African continent. You look at the multi-decade leadership in the entire Central Africa, where you have people like Biya, who's been there for multi-decades, Sassou Nguesso, Basogo Nguema. All of these people go all the way across the entire continent. You think they represent where the continent should be going forward in being able to shape the youths to where they have to go?
Frankly, some of these people should be taking care of their grandchildren and guiding us with advice, useful advice that they've had and experiences they've had. I don't believe that anybody should be a leader after 70 years, not because it's bad, but because really youth represent dynamism, they represent strength, they also represent innovation and modernization. But that doesn't mean that countries cannot tailor what they like. Some countries prefer age to youth when it comes to governance. It's really about combining them very well, because you cannot also leave the age out in the conversation of governance or including them in governance. it is striking that right balance. So, for example, if you look at what in Sierra Leone, there is more happening in Sierra Leone than an anti-corruption revolution. You have young people in really prominent positions in Sierra Leone that are doing great things. So, for example, the Minister of Education is younger than I am, Dr. David Senge.
Wow.
He is the Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education in Sierra Leone. They are heads of institutions, parastatals, very young people who are there. The presidential spokesman is my contemporary, and all these things. We just have to understand that that balance has to be struck. So that is why all of us were excited when, for example, the head of EFCC, a very young man, was also appointed in Nigeria. I mean, it's refreshing to see that. When you go to these conferences, and sometimes you sit down there. So, for example, when I became commissioner at the age of 34, and I will go to the anti-corruption conference, it's almost like I am lost, because you have all these people, some of them over 80 years, maybe the minimum age on that table will be 50 years, and we are sitting down there, and you walk in, for the first time they are seeing you coming in, and you occupy a seat. They are looking like, are you a seat filler, or you are just coming here to have a conversation? But with time, the kind of vibrancy that I brought to the whole thing, the philosophies that I brought in, the approach to things, that is how today I am president of Network Anti-Corruption Institution in West Africa. That is how I am the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption, elected by all African countries. These are dynamics that we have to continue to bring out. Africa was built for the aged, for people who are populated. The dynamics will only change if, for example, more and more young people occupy these positions on the continent, and they do well. They send the right message. That is why I am having these engagements in every country that I go, to really have a conversation on these things, so that they can see and hear, and they can check. I mean, it's easy for you to Google to check what I'm saying. It's not like, it's not a difficult thing to do. Right. But young people have to understand also that there is a responsibility for them to set right examples for other people to have confidence in appointing young people. So for example, when I was appointed commissioner, many people were just waiting for me to mess up. Hey, oh, no, he will do this, he will do this, and things like that. But 3 to 4 years down the line, everybody is now, and now the conversation in Sierra Leone is whether they should change the age of being eligible for presidency from 40 years to 21 years. Which
is what I was going to ask you next. Are you going to run for office someday?
Well, I'm focused on what I am doing now. It's going very well. I think that is really where my heart and mind is. Whatsoever happens in the future is left with God.
Okay. Are you concerned that when somebody else sits on that chair, there is the probability that what you have done will be undone?
Yes, I am very concerned, and a lot of people are concerned in Sierra Leone. It's a conversation that I have a lot of time. Even when I was doing these very radical legal reforms in Sierra Leone, a lot of people were saying, Francis, this is not about you. We all know you. We know your heart. We know the kind of person you are. We know that that is why the president had confidence in you to appoint you to this position. But what happens when you are not there? What I am doing is to lead a revolution in Sierra Leone that is also grooming young people to see what an example is, to understand what leadership is, to be a model leader. For example, the institution that I'm leading now is the model for leadership in Sierra Leone. Even the president, when he's talking about it, somewhere where leadership is making a difference, he says, just look at the anti-corruption institution. I've sat in meetings with ministers where he spent almost 3 minutes describing what has happened at the Anti-Corruption Commission in Sierra Leone and how leadership is everything to transform there. So I'm expecting that by the time I leave there in 5 years, there will be somebody else who is really inspired by what I'm doing. But also that is what happens when you set standards. Anybody who falls below it is setting a dangerous path for himself. So these standards, for example, we are doing very well in all indexes. Every index we are now sitting better than anywhere we have ever been throughout the history of Sierra Leone. If you come and reverse it, for example, in the MCC Control of Corruption scorecard, we were at 49% when I became commissioner. Today we are at 81%. We are supposed, by the time the next scorecard come out, we are chasing 90 or above 90. If you come and take it back to 49%, it's easy for people to know that you have to be kicked out. And that is all I can do.
And it's all we can do also too right now. Thank you very much. Francis Ben Kaifala, who is the commissioner of Commissioner of Anti-Corruption Commission in Sierra Leone. Is also the president of the Network Anti-Corruption Network in West Africa, as well as a member of the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and the great work you're doing also in Sierra Leone I'm going to follow you also on social media. There are millions of viewers who are watching who will just remember this interview and just remember this name and see where it takes us to. Thank you very much, sir, for coming to
You're welcome. And I've had an absolute great time. You guys are great interviewers. Keep it up.
Thank you very much.
Well, may corruption lose the fight. All right, this is where we'll wrap it up on this particular segment. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Well, Aghogho will be taking it over immediately after the break with the Nigeria's next CEO. So sit tight. This is News Hub. Join us again.